that you ought to have, that you and I, are living through an historic transformation.
Richard Wolff believes the BRICS symbolize a historic shift away from US dominance, showing how emerging nations are building new systems to claim independence and global influence.
But I want to talk to you about the BRICS. And I want you to understand not so much that the BRICS represent a challenge to the United States.
The BRICS economy is expanding rapidly, driven by resource wealth, large populations, and a shared push to reduce dependence on Western financial systems.
One economic powerhouse, the center of economic growth and wealth and prosperity.
The prosperity of the BRICS lies in their growing markets, vast natural resources, technological ambitions, and collective drive to reshape global trade and finance.
I call this one the importance of the BRICS. And by that I mean, of course, the new global economic powerhouse comprised of those initials, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. At the very end of August, they have gathered, most of them, not all, but most, in China to celebrate a meeting of the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, which includes a number of BRICS members in China and in Asia, and also to celebrate victory over the Japanese 80 years ago at the end of World War II.
Richard Wolff sees the rise of the BRICS as a turning point. He argues that global power is shifting away from the dominance of the United States.
But I want to talk to you about the BRICS. And I want you to understand not so much that the BRICS represent a challenge to the United States, which is what the Trump administration and the Biden administration shared as a view, but rather to get us to understand as a nation what the enormous importance of the BRICS has become. And that is as much in reaction to Biden and Trump as for reasons of their own. So I think when I'm done, in the few minutes I will take, will leave you with the impression
away from the old Western bloc toward a new coalition: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now with other nations showing interest.
That you ought to have, that you and I, are living through an historic transformation. One economic powerhouse, the center of economic growth and wealth and prosperity, is giving way to another. This has happened many times in European history. It has happened many times in world history. Empires arise and they evolve and then they pass away, giving room to others. And sometimes we haven't had a dominating empire. We don't seem to need one, but we've had them for quite a while. They come and they go. BRICS is the new dominant economic powerhouse center.
The shift is historic. It signals that the world economy is no longer unipolar. It is becoming multipolar.
I'm going to show you that in a moment. The United States and its major allies, the so-called G7, that include beyond the United States, Japan, Canada, Britain, France, Italy, and Germany. They are now fading. They are not the dominant center anymore, and it is highly unlikely. I can't predict the future any more than anyone else can, but from everything I see, it's highly likely this pattern, rise of the BRICS, decline of the G7, is going to change anytime soon.
It is changing fast. For Wolff, this transformation has deep consequences. It challenges the dollar's supremacy.
So let's begin. In what sense can I speak of the dominant core economic powerhouse in the world being the BRICS today? And when I finish with the economics, I'll turn to the politics, and then I'll turn to the military. Not because the military is all that important, but it's because that's what frightens the United States and so many people when it needn't. Here we go. The simplest broad measure of economic bigness, economic power, economic strength is something called the GDP, the gross domestic product, the total value of goods and services produced in a year.
It questions US influence in trade and finance. It opens doors for new alliances.
In a country. The United Nations and many others keep track of the GDP year in and year out of all countries. So we know, for example, what the GDP of the United States is, and we know what the GDP of China is. We likewise know, because we can add them up, what the GDP is of the United States and the 6 allies that make up the G7, and we know what the GDP is of China and its allies, namely now the BRICS, BRICS. Here we go, folks. These numbers scream a simple message if you dare listen.
It creates fresh institutions that rival the IMF and the World Bank.
If you add up the GDP of the United States and its 6 major allies, the so-called G7, it works out to about 29% of the total output of our planet is accomplished by those 7 countries. We have 195 countries in the world, but those 7 alone do 28% of the world's output. What about China and the BRICS? If you add them all up in the same way, they work out to be producing approximately 34 or 35% of the world's output. So please, simply understand, China and the BRICS are a bigger, larger in terms of output, and therefore richer in terms of product.
It suggests that countries in the global south want independence. They want alternatives. They want their own voice.
Then the G7. That's been true since the year 2020, and the gap between them gets larger each year since 2020, including 2024 and 2025, as I speak to you. But more than that, the GDP, if you break it down, will tell us what has happened to the core manufacturing industry at the base of any economy. And that we all know because you can see it. Industry, which was once something that characterized Western Europe, only and then moved out of Western Europe, which lost much of its industry because it moved to the United States, to Japan, to other parts of the world. Well, it keeps moving. It always did. It always does. The whole issue of tariffs, ever since Mr. Trump decided that throwing these at every other country in the world was some kind of clever, smart, or strong action he could and would take to strangle up the world trade system. Is it a good piece of theater? It is. No one has ever done that before. Hit the entire world with a tariff all at once, and with many of the tariffs so high that it would basically bring trade between the tariffed country and the United States to an end. It made it impossible for businesses to plan where or how or when to invest, because the profitability of any option they might pursue depends on the tariffs. And Mr. Trump not only created them and threw them at countries, but he threw them helter-skelter.
Richard Wolff believes Trump's tariff policies are a mix of deception and political theater.
They went up one day, down the next day. They were suspended for 12 days, for 20 days, for 90 days. You couldn't make sense of it. You couldn't keep up with it. And you weren't going to take the risk of moving production from one place to another based on something that was so herky-jerky as Mr. Trump's tariffs. That's why you haven't seen any mass movement of production from the rest of the world to America. Bringing those jobs back that he talked about, lying. He haven't brought them back. And he hasn't brought them back for a very good reason. There's no way for them to decide, even if they pulled up stakes from the factory they have in China or the factory they have in Brazil, why bring it to the United States? As you're going to see in a few moments, the United States is the last place they'd move production as these tariffs get imposed, deposed, postponed, raised, lowered, and no end in sight.
He says they are presented as protection for American workers. In practice, they often benefit big corporations.
Mr. Trump seems to enjoy doing that. He now puts tariffs on countries because he doesn't like who they are or not prosecuting in their courts. I mean, it doesn't seem to make any difference. So no company can plan. But that's the least of the lying. To show you how deep the lying is, how many layers of lies there are here, I'm going to take you through very quickly how the tariffs actually work. Here we go. Tariffs are a tax. That's all they are. The word tariff is the funny name for historical reasons given to a tax that attaches to importing goods and services. A good or a service made outside the United States, when it enters the United States to be sold here or to be used as an input for producing something here, that is an import.
They raise consumer prices. They distort trade flows. They fuel international tensions.
That's the word we use. Produced outside, brought inside. A tariff is a tax on that import. Well, then who pays it? The answer, whoever does the importing. Most imports in America are brought in by companies, by enterprises, capitalist enterprises. I'm going to give you some examples. Walmart brings in tons of stuff from around the world in order to sell it in Walmart department stores across America. If you've ever been to a Walmart, you've looked at the label, where is that toy produced? Where is that shirt produced? You'll see that the vast majority of time it's from outside the United States.
Wolff argues that the lies surrounding tariffs are part of a larger strategy. They frame economic pain as patriotism.
The same is true of Target. The same is true of Amazon. The same is true of fill in the blank in retail. Here's another example. American automobiles, the ones put together in Detroit or in Ohio, use many imported parts. A carburetor, a brake shoe, a shock absorber, whatever it might be. Those are imports because those goods that come from outside, being imports, will have to pay a tariff, a tax. And to whom does the tax go? Uncle Sam. So when Mr. Trump says, I'm going to hit China with a tariff, he is lying. We, the American government, cannot tax the people of another country, no more than the Chinese government taxes us.
They redirect anger from elites to foreigners. They hide the real causes of inequality. They make working people believe they are defended when they are actually exploited.
That's not how it works or ever has. The American government can only tax Americans, and that's what it does. It taxes us as individuals, and it also taxes enterprises. It taxes our income, it taxes their profits. That's how it works. So now let's follow the bouncing tariff ball. If something comes into the United States, the company that brings it in has to pay a tax to Uncle Sam. It's an American company most of the time, although foreign companies based in America also bring imports. Whoever brings it in, they pay the tax to Uncle Sam. So the vast majority of all tariff taxes are paid by Americans to Washington, D.C.
For Wolff, tariffs under Trump symbolize a dangerous pattern, a government that uses nationalism as a mask.
So no more let's talk lying about tariffs being things we do to punish another country. What does the American company do that has to pay a tariff to Uncle Sam because Mr. Trump said so? If that company used to bring in a $10,000 piece of equipment and there's now a 50% tariff on it, then that company has to pay, $10,000 worth, if that's what the number was I just used, $10,000 to get the machine, and another $5,000, 50% of that, to Uncle Sam. So the final cost to the American company for the $10,000 machine that they used to spend $10,000 on is now raised to $15,000. Any American who wants to buy it will have to pay $15,000 instead of $10,000 because of the tariff.
A leader who manipulates facts, a system where truth is optional, and an economy where power serves the few at the expense of the many.
But what I've just told you means that tariffs raise prices. Tariffs are inflationary because the companies that pay the tariff, the importing companies, will usually try to pass off the burden of having to pay that tariff to Uncle Sam by jacking up the retail price that you and I have to pay. The more he can do that, the more the importing company has passed the burden of the tariff off of the company that imports and on to the American consumer. All companies that are importing will respond to Mr. Trump's tariffs by jacking up the price to the rest of us. Some will do more of it, some will do less of it. I call this one statistics, the real issue. I'm going to start with the issue that isn't so real, the one we all know about. When President Trump fired the commissioner in charge of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because she had the very bad taste of issuing the statistics in the way that the Bureau normally does, letting us know what the unemployment rate is these days, how many people are out of work and looking, and so on, and adjusting the previous 2 months, which they always do, because it takes more than a month or two to collect and review all the statistics.
Richard Wolff sees Trump's removal of the Labor Statistics Commissioner as a direct assault on institutional credibility.
And her statistical report indicated that unemployment is worse this month than we hoped it would be, and she revised downward the employment numbers for 2 previous months. So we're now looking at a quarter of a year, which, as many economists, left-wingers, right-wingers, and those in the middle, had foreseen that we would be heading into a recession, into an economic decline. And the reason for it is very simple.